Joe Biden is the center. Joe Biden is this year's Hillary.
Michael Moore, who predicted that Trump would win in 2016, was on MSNBC and shared some of his more recent insights into the election and impeachment, including how Joe Biden is this year's Hillary Clinton, which I completely agree with. But first, so I have 3 clips here. The first one discusses Michael Moore's views on impeachment.
All that time waiting for Mueller to save us. And, and I came on here, I was on one of these shows last year, and I said, if you're waiting on Mueller to save you, you're not going to save us. We have to save us. And I think what's so profound in these last 5 or 6 days is that, and why people have responded so overwhelmingly to the Democrats and to what Pelosi did, is that it looks like the Democrats have made a decision this week, not based on what is politically expedient or what might get them reelected, because when they did last week, it was still under 50%, the people that wanted even the impeachment investigation. They made the decision to do this based on because it was right. And any time the Democrats make a decision because it's right to do it, it's morally right to do it, they will find millions of people flocking to the polls to support them, because that's the country we live in now. That's the majority of this country. They agree with the Democrats, but they don't always like who the Democrats put up.
The polling shows right here from September to today a shift. And my question to you as someone who deals with this is, do you think that shift would continue if Democrats are on offense?
Okay, you've been around the news business long enough to know that shift right there that you've got on the screen, that's stunning. In a week for Americans to go, because really most Americans didn't want this to be the result. Most Americans don't want this kind of conflict. I may want it or whatever, but I realized most people are just like, please, I've got to get on with my life and my work and my job and my kids got homework, and I'll vote next year and then we'll get rid of them. That shift, and the other poll I saw on Morning Joe this morning, not only do so many Americans now, so many millions want the committee to investigate, the higher number is for impeach and remove when that question is asked.
So there you go. I completely agree with Michael Moore here on impeachment. I also thought that once Democrats would finally move for an official impeachment inquiry and actually make the case to the American people, actually, be in the media discussing this day after day, that people would jump on board. And we've already seen, skyrocketing numbers for support of impeachment after it was below 50% just a couple weeks ago. So it shows you, as Michael Moore says, when the Democrats actually fight for something that is right, they get the people on board. And you see this with other issues as well. When Bernie began talking about, say, Medicare for all, it began to grow in support because there was someone out there actually discussing it. Or canceling student debt, when he began discussing that. Again, support for these things grow the more you actually make the case for them on television and get, to people's eyeballs. Now, let me get to this next piece here. Keeping in mind, Michael Moore predicted that Trump would win in 2016. So how are those insights that he had back then, how is he applying them to today? Watch.
And it's why every beaten down, nameless, forgotten working stiff who used to be part of what was called the middle class loves Trump. He is the human Molotov cocktail that they've been waiting for. Yeah, and Bernie in 2016 represented that same sense of he's an outsider. He's going to stop the madness of what working people are going through. That's why Bernie won Michigan. Bernie won Wisconsin. Why the candidate would not go to the 2 states that she didn't win? It'd be the first place I'd go. If you can't win amongst your own people, how are you going to win Michigan and Wisconsin if you don't even show up?
So that is just exactly right. Bernie Sanders, as we all discussed, when I say we, I'm talking about, progressive channels on YouTube, left-wing channels on YouTube. We all discussed that Bernie Sanders spoke to real people, much in the way that, or in a similar way that Trump spoke to the anger and the fear side of many voters. but had, empty solutions for those people. Bernie Sanders spoke to people with an optimistic and uplifting view and what could be done if we actually apply ourselves and, get out there and get involved and support a candidate like Bernie Sanders. Now, obviously, he lost the primary back in 2016, but that same message applies to today. Bernie Sanders won those swing states that Hillary lost in the general election. He won those states in the primary. He can win those states again this time. If you look at the polling from Obama to the counties that went from Obama twice to Trump, Bernie Sanders has those districts, has those counties today. He has the most individual contributors, even beating Biden and Warren combined. Bernie Sanders has more than them combined in individual contributors in those counties that went from Obama to Trump. That right there tells you that Bernie Sanders is the candidate that speaks to the American people, that can speak to these swing counties, to these swing states, and actually defeat Donald Trump. Not even just, barely defeat him, but I think would easily defeat Donald Trump in a general election matchup. But now let's get to Joe Biden, Michael Moore's thoughts on Joe Biden.
What is Joe Biden doing in dealing with the last 10 days, which are but a tiny preview of what any nominee is going to face against this president?
You want the honest answer, or
hold on. Let me think about it. Let me think about it.
We are live.
That's a fair point.
Joe Biden is the center. Joe Biden is this year's Hillary. Joe Biden is not going to excite the base to get out there and vote on November 3rd, 2020. 70% of the people voting next year are either women, people of color, or young people between the ages of 18 and 35. That's 70%. Who is going to excite that 18 to 35-year-old person? Who's going to excite women and African Americans and Hispanic people? Biden, but your question was, what about Biden in this last week? And why does he seem to be, he's there and he's not there? And he needs to be more there. The things that he said publicly are very strong. But it looks like he's not really wanting to deal with it. It appears, if I could just now speak from Michigan, it appears that he's afraid to be out there, that there's some piece of this that he doesn't want to deal with in terms of his son and the gas company and all that.
So let me just address the last part that he said first here. So Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, made $50,000 a month from a Ukrainian natural gas company. Now, this isn't a reason to not investigate, Trump, to not push for impeachment, but it's simply to say what was happening was legal. And this is somebody who simply was making $50,000 a month because of the perceived ability to potentially influence the vice president. So this is just pure nepotism. This is an example of how the system is rigged. If you have someone like Joe Biden running in the election, whether it's Trump or somebody else, this could easily be a point to stress on to showcase how Biden is no different than any typical elite. Oh, Joe Biden, his son made $50,000 a month with Ukraine just because he's Joe Biden's son. That alone turns off people, especially the people that don't vote generally, the people that Democrats need to get out to vote with a bold message. You will suppress the vote by showing them that their candidate is just as corrupt as anybody else in politics. Now, to his other point, this kind of leads to his other point, Joe Biden is this year's Hillary Clinton. 100%. He's a centrist. He offers nothing exciting, nothing new, nothing different. And he won't excite the base, as I was saying. So this is like Joe Biden has this phony air that he's like a working class guy because I guess for years the media treated him as a working class dude. Joe Biden has stood up for credit card companies, for Wall Street, for large corporations, against climate initiatives. I mean, the idea that Joe Biden is your working class guy standing with people is just completely absurd. But a lot of people have this impression of him. But I think it's clearly, looking at the polling, ever since he announced, Biden's support has gone down every month because people are slowly waking up to this. And when they see him on the campaign trail, I mean, you could barely tell what he's even saying. Now, to the question of who's going to excite young people, women, and people of color, as Michael Moore points out, a lot of people assume, well, I guess you need a young candidate, you need a person of color, and you need a woman to excite those people out to go out and vote. That's not really the case. People, young people, people of color, largely, we want somebody who is going to actually represent our interests. So me as a young person, I want politicians that will actually look at science, look at facts, take things like the climate crisis seriously, look at student debt, look at healthcare, look at income inequality, address all of these issues with actual serious policy proposals, which is why when you look at the actual data, Bernie Sanders has these groups. New findings from The Economist shows that women under 45 make up a larger share of Bernie Sanders' base than do men in their same age group, contradicting a popular narrative that says the 2020 Democratic candidate's supporters are overwhelmingly white and male, to the virtual exclusion of other groups. Polling has continually proven that Sanders' base is much more diverse than the figure of the Bernie bro would suggest. An analysis of polling between November 2018 and March 2019 found both that Sanders was more popular among people of color than among white people, and that women supported Sanders just as much as men did, if not more, according to Vox. Earlier this month, a Univision Noticias poll found Sanders was the candidate Latino voters favored most after current Democratic frontrunner Joe Biden. And The Economist's latest numbers show Sanders in the number 2 spot behind Biden with Hispanic and black voters. So, first, it's important to point out here that a lot of Joe Biden's support that he still has with Hispanic and black voters, that is simply held over from the fact that he was Barack Obama's VP and that people know the name Joe Biden. So name recognition and his attachment to Barack Obama is what makes up Biden's support base right now, which is also why his support base is so weak, because they're not actually attached to the candidate. So the more they see him, the more they see Biden on the campaign trail, his support drops and drops and drops. Meanwhile, Bernie Sanders has held consistent support among all of these groups. He has the most diverse support base. He wins swing states, wins swing counties, has the most individual donors, and beats Trump in every single poll. If there is a candidate in this race that, first of all, answers exactly what Michael Moore is talking about here, and also a candidate that can not only defeat Trump, but truly represent the interests of the American people, I think it's clear that candidate is Bernie Sanders.